Right now, as you're reading this, roughly 50 different hormones are racing through your bloodstream, and every single one of them is quietly running your life without asking permission. They're deciding whether you're hungry, whether you're calm, whether you fall asleep tonight, whether you fall in love, and whether you panic in traffic. You didn't choose any of it. Your endocrine system did. And most people go their entire lives without knowing what a single one of these chemicals actually does. So let's fix that. Every major hormone in your body, what it does, how it works, and why you'd notice immediately if it disappeared. Let's start in the brain, because that's actually where almost this entire story begins. Deep inside your skull sits a structure called the hypothalamus, and it acts like the command center of your entire hormonal system. It doesn't just send out hormones directly into the body most of the time. Instead, it talks to a tiny gland hanging just below it called the pituitary gland, often nicknamed the master gland, because the pituitary's job is to release hormones that then tell other glands throughout your body what to do. It's a chain of command, brain to pituitary to gland to effect. And almost every hormone you're about to hear about exists somewhere on that chain. Cortisol is probably the most infamous hormone on this entire list, and it's earned a bad reputation it doesn't fully deserve. Produced by your adrenal glands sitting on top of your kidneys, cortisol's real job is survival. When your brain perceives a threat, real or imagined, it triggers a chain reaction that ends with cortisol flooding your bloodstream, spiking your blood sugar for quick energy, sharpening your focus, and temporarily suppressing things your body doesn't need in an emergency, like digestion and immune function. That's exactly why chronic stress wrecks your health. Cortisol was built for short bursts, not for being stuck in the on position for months while you worry about bills and deadlines. When it's constantly elevated, it starts breaking down muscle, storing fat around your midsection specifically, and disrupting your sleep, since cortisol is also supposed to follow a daily rhythm, high in the morning to wake you up, low at night to let you rest. Adrenaline, cortisol's faster cousin, works on an entirely different timescale. Where cortisol takes minutes to ramp up, adrenaline hits in seconds. Released by the same adrenal glands during acute danger or excitement, it's responsible for that unmistakable feeling of your heart slamming against your ribs, your palms going sweaty, and your senses suddenly sharpening. It redirects blood flow toward your muscles and away from things like digestion, preparing you to either fight or run. It's the reason a near-miss car accident leaves you shaking minutes after the danger has already passed. Your body simply hasn't metabolized the adrenaline yet. Insulin might be the hormone with the single biggest impact on modern health, because it governs how your body handles the food you eat. Produced by the pancreas, insulin's job is to let glucose, the sugar from food, move out of your bloodstream and into your cells where it can actually be used for energy. Without insulin, glucose just sits in the blood doing damage instead of doing its job. This is the exact mechanism that breaks down in diabetes. In type 1 diabetes, the pancreas simply stops producing insulin. In type 2, cells gradually stop responding properly to the insulin that's still being made, a condition called insulin resistance, which forces the pancreas to work harder and harder until it eventually can't keep up. Glucagon is insulin's direct opposite, and together they form one of the most elegant balancing acts in the entire body. While insulin lowers blood sugar by helping cells absorb it, glucagon raises blood sugar by signaling the liver to release stored glucose back into the bloodstream. This is why blood sugar doesn't just crash after hours without food. Your pancreas is constantly adjusting the ratio of these two hormones, insulin and glucagon, to keep your blood sugar inside a narrow, survivable range no matter what you're doing. Thyroid hormone, primarily in the form of two compounds called T3 and T4, produced by the thyroid gland in your neck, essentially controls your body's metabolic speed. Too much thyroid hormone, a condition called hyperthyroidism, and your whole system revs up, racing heart, unexplained weight loss, anxiety, trouble sleeping. Too little, hypothyroidism, and everything slows down, fatigue, weight gain, feeling cold constantly, brain fog. It's remarkable how many symptoms people attribute to laziness or aging that are actually just a thyroid gland producing the wrong amount of two small molecules. Testosterone gets discussed almost exclusively in the context of men, but that framing undersells it. Yes, it's the primary driver of male puberty, muscle mass, bone density, and sex drive, produced mainly in the testes. But women produce it too, in smaller amounts, from their ovaries and adrenal glands, and it plays a real role in female libido, muscle maintenance, and energy levels. Testosterone naturally declines with age in both sexes, which is part of why muscle mass and energy tend to drop over the decades, independent of lifestyle changes. Estrogen is often treated as testosterone's mirror opposite, but it's really a family of related hormones, produced mainly by the ovaries, responsible for female puberty, the menstrual cycle, and pregnancy. Estrogen levels rise and fall throughout the menstrual cycle in a predictable pattern, and that fluctuation is directly responsible for a huge portion of the physical and emotional changes many women notice cycle to cycle. Estrogen also plays a protective role in bone density and cardiovascular health, which is a major reason bone fragility and heart disease risk both increase after menopause, when estrogen production drops sharply. Progesterone works alongside estrogen, but with a very different job description. Produced primarily after ovulation, progesterone's main role is to prepare the uterine lining for a potential pregnancy, and then maintain that lining if pregnancy occurs. If there's no pregnancy, progesterone levels fall, which triggers the uterine lining to shed, and that's what causes menstruation. Progesterone is also part of why many women feel noticeably calmer or sleepier in the days after ovulation, since it has a mild sedative effect on the brain. Oxytocin has earned the nickname the love hormone, and while that's an oversimplification, it's not entirely wrong. Released by the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, oxytocin surges during childbirth, where it triggers uterine contractions, during breastfeeding, where it helps milk release, and during physical touch, hugging, and orgasm, where it promotes bonding and trust between people. It's a major reason new parents often describe an intense, almost overwhelming rush of connection to their newborn. That's not just emotion, it's measurable brain chemistry. Vasopressin, sometimes called antidiuretic hormone, doesn't get nearly the attention it deserves, considering how directly it affects your daily life. Released by the pituitary gland, its primary job is regulating how much water your kidneys reabsorb versus how much they excrete as urine. When you're dehydrated, vasopressin spikes, telling your kidneys to hold on to water and concentrate your urine. When you're overhydrated, vasopressin drops, letting your kidneys flush out the excess. This is the exact mechanism behind why your urine gets darker when you haven't had enough water. Melatonin is the hormone responsible for one of the most universal human experiences, feeling sleepy at night. Produced by the pineal gland deep in the brain, melatonin release is directly triggered by darkness and suppressed by light, which is exactly why staring at a bright phone screen before bed can delay your ability to fall asleep. It doesn't force you unconscious the way a sedative would. Instead, it signals to your body that it's nighttime, nudging your internal clock towards sleep readiness. This is also why traveling across time zones disrupts sleep so badly. Your melatonin release is still synced to your old location's darkness schedule. Growth hormone, produced by the pituitary gland, does exactly what the name suggests during childhood and adolescence, stimulating the growth of bone and muscle tissue. But it doesn't disappear in adulthood. It continues playing a role in tissue repair, muscle maintenance, and metabolism throughout life, and it's released in pulses, especially during deep sleep, which is part of why sleep deprivation interferes with muscle recovery and tissue repair, even when diet and exercise stay identical. Leptin and ghrelin work as a pair, and understanding them explains a huge amount of why dieting is so difficult. Leptin, released by fat cells, tells your brain you have enough stored energy and suppresses appetite. Ghrelin, released mainly by the stomach when it's empty, does the opposite, stimulating hunger. In a healthy system, these two hormones balance out. More fat stores mean more leptin, which should mean less hunger. But chronic dieting and significant weight loss can actually lower leptin levels and raise ghrelin, which is a major biological reason many people regain weight after dieting. Their body isn't failing them. Their hormones are actively fighting the deficit. Serotonin sits in an unusual position because it functions partly as a hormone and partly as a neurotransmitter, meaning it acts both in the bloodstream and directly between brain cells. It's heavily associated with mood regulation, and low serotonin activity is linked to depression, which is exactly why many antidepressants work, by increasing how long serotonin remains active between neurons. But serotonin isn't just a brain chemical. The majority of it is actually produced in the gut, where it helps regulate digestion, which is part of the emerging science behind why gut health and mood appear to be so closely connected. Dopamine, like serotonin, straddles the line between hormone and neurotransmitter, and it's frequently misunderstood as simply the pleasure chemical. It's more accurate to describe dopamine as the anticipation and motivation chemical. It spikes not just when you receive a reward, but often more intensely right before you receive it, which is exactly the mechanism that makes things like social media notifications, gambling, and junk food so compulsively engaging. Your brain isn't just chasing pleasure, it's chasing the anticipation of pleasure. And modern technology has gotten remarkably good at exploiting that specific mechanism. Parathyroid hormone rarely comes up in casual conversation, but it's essential for something your body treats as non-negotiable: calcium levels. Produced by 4 tiny glands behind the thyroid, parathyroid hormone raises blood calcium when it drops too low, primarily by pulling calcium out of bone. This matters because calcium isn't just for bone strength. It's required for nerve signaling and muscle contraction, including your heart muscle. If calcium drops dangerously low, parathyroid hormone will sacrifice bone density to keep blood calcium in a survivable range, which is part of why chronic calcium deficiency contributes to weakened bones over time. Aldosterone, produced by the adrenal glands alongside cortisol, plays a quieter but critical role in regulating blood pressure. It controls how much sodium your kidneys retain, and since water follows sodium, aldosterone directly influences your blood volume and blood pressure. When blood pressure or blood volume drops, aldosterone rises, telling the kidneys to hold on to more sodium and water to compensate. This entire system is a major target for common blood pressure medications, which work in part by blocking aldosterone's effects. Prolactin's most well-known job is stimulating milk production after childbirth, but its influence doesn't stop there. Produced by the pituitary gland, prolactin levels naturally rise during pregnancy and breastfeeding, and elevated prolactin during this period also tends to suppress ovulation, which is part of the biological explanation behind reduced fertility while breastfeeding, though it's not a reliable form of birth control. Outside of pregnancy, prolactin is normally kept low, and abnormally high levels in people who aren't pregnant or breastfeeding can signal an underlying issue that typically needs medical attention. Erythropoietin, usually shortened to EPO, is produced primarily by the kidneys and has one very specific job: stimulating the bone marrow to produce more red blood cells. It rises when the kidneys detect low oxygen levels in the blood, which is exactly why people who live at high altitude naturally develop more red blood cells over time. And it's also the reason EPO has been repeatedly abused as a performance-enhancing drug in endurance sports, since more red blood cells means more oxygen delivered to muscles during exertion. What ties every single one of these hormones together is feedback. Almost none of them operate in isolation. Your body is constantly measuring the output of one hormone and adjusting another in response, a system called a feedback loop. Too much thyroid hormone, and the brain tells the thyroid to slow down. Too little blood sugar, and glucagon rises while insulin falls. Too much cortisol for too long, and the entire stress response system can eventually become dysregulated. None of these chemicals work as isolated switches. They're part of an enormous interconnected regulatory network, adjusting itself thousands of times a day, almost entirely without your awareness, just to keep you alive, functioning, and somehow still capable of reading to the end of a video like this one.